is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culture Ford. Bird Culture Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
Hey everybody, welcome into a brand new edition of the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com, Sic'Em365 Radio. Spring football is underway, spring sports fully underway as well. We got a lot to talk about. I'm Craig Smoke, Sic'Em365 Radio host and writer, joined as always by Grayson Grundhafer, Director of Broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter for Sic'Em365. And we have got football and basketball and baseball and a few other sports to dabble in a little bit, but a lot of football, a little bit of basketball as well. I mean, we got a full meal deal here, but before we dive into all of that, Grayson, got Pro Day coming up, got spring ball practices through their first week, spring sports, as I mentioned. You keeping busy?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, football recruiting is kind of at a point right now where there's visitors on campus a lot throughout the week and on the weekend. So there'll be a lot coming this weekend as well. There's kind of news and nuggets going on throughout spring football, which, of course, that'll ramp up as we kind of get deeper into spring ball. More storylines will come out, and obviously more decisions will be made, and more kind of guys will start to rise to the top. So that's very fun to watch as well. Spring sports, obviously, full throttle right now. I know, Keontae George is playing a McDonald's All-American game tonight. So there's a lot of cool storylines going on with Baylor right now, but also some storylines where you're going, man, some of these spring sports feels like they could be in better positions than they currently are.
Yeah, well, it was a very successful fall, and the spring's been a little bit rockier, and, basketball coming to a short, kind of abrupt close for both the men and the women. I guess it's kind of pivoted that spotlight, more towards those other sports to kind of take up our time and take up, the weekends and all of that, whereas we were kind of expecting both the men and the women to still be playing even just about right now, maybe having just finished their seasons at this point. But instead, it's been over for a little over a week, and we're going to get into all of what's going on. But let's start off with, actually, I'm going to throw you a curveball here, basketball. Throw a little curveball because of the news that came out on Friday. LJ Cryer and his graphic that he posted on social media saying that he was going to be undergoing surgery on both of his feet and recuperating and getting ready to come back for next season. And he didn't say at the end, I'm coming back to Baylor, but Scott Drew followed up on that tweet. Several other people did as well, all indicating like, hey, yes, this is awesome, and we're happy to have you back and all of that. So it wasn't, like an official announcement, so to speak, but it was official news on, just what's been going on with him and what he's going to need to get taken care of, because we've all known that he was hurt. It's just a matter of, okay, when can he get healthy? It wasn't this season, unfortunately, but hopefully it will be this offseason, and that will mean that he can play with a Keontae George and all the rest of the guys who do decide to come back or will be back, and that would be huge, because this was a different team pre-LJ Cryer's injury and post-LJ Cryer's injury, and I don't think they exit as early as they do if he's healthy. So your thoughts on LJ Cryer's news from last Friday?
Yeah, this has been just one of those really interesting storylines, and honestly, this basketball decision-making process is going to be one of the more interesting things I think we follow throughout this time, just because I think when you look at kind of the roster and where it's at, if everyone comes back, makes decisions to come back, this team could be really, really good and really full of talent and really full of experienced guys. And so LJ coming back into the fold, I think it's really important. And the big reason I say that is because when you look at their roster, they have Adam Flagler, who's a great three-point shooter. Akinjo is an average three-point shooter, so they really need another guy that can space the floor. I think Keontae George will probably shoot around 38% from three in college, which is very, very good. Could get up to as high as 40%, I think. But to have a guy like LJ, who is legit probably if he gets open looks, he's like a 48% three-point shooter. And most times, most seasons, he'll probably be right around that 42, 43% from three, which is just such a luxury to have in today's game. You can never have too many guys that can shoot the ball from distance like LJ. So I think it's big news. My biggest thing for him, though, is get healthy. I really want to see him get healthy because foot surgeries, that's a big deal. For a lot of guys, that's a career ender. So I'm hoping for him that it's a nice, easy process, hoping he'll be back and ready to go by summer. I think that's a realistic timeline for him. And if he is, I think he could have a huge impact on this team. And that's pretty much as we await all these other decisions to be made on this team. I mean, you could go from having basically the exact same team next year to having just a completely different roster by the time next year comes around.
Yeah, you could. So excitement over Keontae George's arrival, as well as other new faces, but excitement I think as well over the fact that an LJ Cryer could be back, and who else remains to be seen. I did get word that looks like Baylor men's basketball will be announcing some sort of staff, either promotion or addition here later today. So we will see that shortly.
Yeah, and I actually think it's probably going to be both. I think they'll probably add someone, but I think they're also due for a promotion, right? Because
I just glanced at it, so maybe that's the case.
I didn't look, but I would think that it might be two moves, just because you might have someone take Tang's spot and responsibilities while also adding someone to come in and also take up a role. We'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. I'm very curious by it, though, right? I mean, you got to find someone that's going to come in and replace Tang, and it might just be an on-staff type move, like you said, a promotion, but it'll be an interesting storyline to follow as well. Like I said, Keontae George will be playing in the McDonald's All-American game tonight as well, which will be a lot of fun to follow and watch. He won the three-point shooting contest. He beat out Grady Dick last night to win that award as well. So good things happening with him. I think he's got a very bright future, as we've talked about at Baylor. And I think if this team comes back, you add Keontae George, I mean, they might be due for another major run at the NCAA tournament.
Meanwhile, in men's basketball, got Villanova and Kansas, and then North Carolina Duke as your Final Four.
What a crazy matchup.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? I mean, just one of the crazier, cool matchups to see Duke versus North Carolina in a Final Four. That atmosphere is going to be electric in New Orleans, I think.
Yeah, so Kansas got an opportunity to win one for the Big 12, and then over on the women's side, Louisville versus South Carolina, UConn versus Stanford for all the parity. And oh my gosh, y'all make fun of women's basketball, but look how exciting it is. 3 1 seeds and a 2. So, there was a little bit more parity, but it wasn't like this was like the Cinderella tournament by any means.
Isn't UConn the 2 seed also?
Yeah.
Which is like...
No, I saw a tweet as recently as last night talking about the excitement level and all this stuff, and I was like, the games might be good. I'm not watching all of them. I don't know, but, for all the talk about y'all bash on women's sports, and it's not that, and this is just random, it's like Alyssa Smith randomly popping off at like some tweet she saw a year ago of somebody who, made a comment. But yeah, in the end, it's 3 1 seeds and a 2, and UConn's a 2. So,
right. It went chalk, and that just makes it even more frustrating that Baylor lost in the second round. When you see all these other highly rated teams just, cruising right on to the Final Four, it's like it was right there for Baylor to make a run, and unfortunate that didn't happen.
So elsewhere, football spring practice is underway, and we've got an opportunity here from Dave Aranda and the quarterbacks and Sean Bell thus far, and there will be more later today. And we got Pro Day coming up on Wednesday, but, let's start off with spring ball. And Grayson, just your thoughts. I mean, we don't really have like a preview, review type of thing. I mean, I haven't even been to a single practice because it conflicts with the show. And so I haven't been able to go over there for a media session just yet. So I have nothing, to report back on as of now that it's like, burning up. And I've written about pretty much everything else that's on my mind here. So for you, what's sticking out? I mean, the quarterback battle and some of the comments last week were of interest. It's Gary's job to lose, basically, is how I read it all and heard it all. And you got Josh Fleeks moving to running back, looking like he's wearing number 4. So I guess the single digits thing is out the window finally, perhaps.
Is he? Oh, I didn't even see. He was wearing 21 when I was out there,
maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. Maybe it's somebody else. I thought it was him, but I could have just glanced wrong.
Because unless he took Christian's off? Like
maybe not
on the other end.
Maybe not. Maybe that was just me misfiring on what I saw. But regardless, let's take the single digits out of there. The quarterback battle, what else is of interest to you from spring practices?
Yeah, I think, looking at the quarterback position, obviously we've kind of talked about that ad nauseum. I think the biggest storyline from it really is
it was Morgan. Sorry, I got
you're good.
pictures backwards.
But I think the biggest storyline that I'm kind of looking at is just the fact that Shapen seems healthy. Right. I think that was one of the bigger questions I had coming into the spring was, is he going to be healthy? Is he going to be healthy enough to really actually compete during the spring for the job? And I think based on what we've seen so far, I think that appears to be the case. And so while I do think it's Gary's job to lose, I think Sean Bell pretty much said that and admitted it as well. I also think it's nice to see that Blake Shapen's going to get out there full health and be able to actually compete in that competition. So I do think that was pretty noteworthy from the first couple days. I think, I posted about the wide receiver room. I'm just very impressed by it. I just see so much size and athleticism. I just really think this group is going to come together. Now, will it all come together this year? That's a big question, right? Because they are young. But what I see is the most physically imposing wide receiving room I've ever seen at Baylor. And that's saying something. I know there have been some amazing groups, but looking at these guys, so many guys over 6'3", 200 pounds, so athletic, so long, so rangy. And then Dallas Baker, just a massive dude as well. So it kind of all fits together. Very curious to see what kind of strides that group makes as spring continues. Not much news on the offensive line. I wouldn't say, the starting lineup, the only kind of odd one was Mose Jeffrey was starting, but that's because Micah Mascua wasn't out there. So curious to see what happens there. But I will say it is curious that Mose was ahead of Gavin Byers on the two deep, at least the day that I was out there. So I believe that's noteworthy to an extent because I think a lot of people are anticipating it's Gavin versus Micah for that other spot, for that other guard spot, and it might be that Mose is right there with them. So we'll see how that progresses going forward. Outside of that, the defensive side, I think the big storyline was probably Matt Jones seeming like he's going to fit in at the will linebacker position, which is the spot that Terrell Bernard played a season ago. I think that's big news because it allows Garmin Randolph to really thrive at the jack position because I do think he is the most talented jack they have on the roster. I don't think he's the prototypical jack, but I do think as a pass rusher, he brings some elite qualities to the jack position that I don't think necessarily anyone else does, at least that I've seen up to this point. I do think guys like Jackie Marshall, Anthony Nyanwu also have a high ceiling there, but I do like what I've seen from Garmin with his size. I think that was very intriguing, and it also gives me hope that maybe Matt Jones has taken a step forward in his progression, as we know he needs to after watching, kind of what happened to him against Oklahoma State a year ago.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Mose Jeffrey, definitely. I wasn't even, thinking about him much at all, quite frankly. When thinking about starters and all that. But again, we haven't been around these guys. We don't know who's banged up, who's nursing this, who's got a class they have to miss for whatever. So, without like that daily of being there, you can't really tell who's maybe just there for that day or who's playing more that day or what have you. But yeah, and there's no roster online, so I don't know what's going on with that as we're a week in and there's no roster. But
on our paper roster, the weights are it's not updated.
Yeah,
it's just not. Like some guys are. Jackie Marshall was the biggest one. That guy's like at least 260 pounds. I think he's listed at like 230 or something. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of off. I need to see that get updated. I feel like that's huge for the media and everyone to know accurate heights and weights at this point.
I don't know what's going on with that. It's kind of strange because they handed out a roster at that first day or whatever. And then I haven't seen anything since. And I'll see later today if maybe they're handing out some. But we did notice no Dakota Doyle on the roster. No Jonah White on the roster, no Jackson Gleason on the roster, and am I missing one?
Christoph
Henley, yeah.
No, I think there was one more.
But Christoph was weird too because he was on the roster last year but never played, and then he just wasn't on the roster anymore. But I know he's very smart, and I think he's probably off doing double degree business work or something like that. So I'm not totally surprised by that, but it was just kind of a quiet exit, quite frankly.
Yeah, and then Tyler Henderson.
Who, and like I said on Twitter, somebody's like, hey, are these transfer portal guys or whatever? It's like, I just think it's kind of writing on the wall for some of these guys, and maybe some of them are done with football, and, I don't know what else, but it's just typical attrition. When we talk about attrition, like, this is what it normally is like. You just suddenly, there's some guys that are no longer part of your roster for one reason or another. And so for this team, there's 4 or 5 guys now that it appears are no longer with the team.
Yeah, and I told you on the main show, Jack was there with me, and so I did a rapid look through the roster, and I think the first 6 names I said, 4 of them were the 4 guys that weren't on the roster, and then Kristoff was the addition. I don't think these were terribly unexpected, to be honest with you. I think there was kind of an inkling that a couple of these guys might be gone. It ends up being quite a few, and honestly, we talk about attrition, how it's not a great thing, but sometimes it's really healthy for a roster to have some attrition, especially at positions where, guys might not get an opportunity to play, or they're not going to make an impact in their time at Baylor. Sometimes it's best for both parties to move on. So I think for the roster itself, I think these are going to be healthy losses, even though you hate to see guys leave, obviously.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So Fleeks is at running back. We know that. Quarterback battle's going on. Mose Jeffrey was kind of a surprise to see on the offensive line, but again, it's just all sort of moving parts right now. So, let's see where we are by the end of spring ball and kind of who's lined up where and all that.
Yeah, and Elijah Ellis was in red, so he's banged up. He was supposed to be a backup tackle for this team.
So joining Jalen Ellis in the red jerseys.
Jalen was wearing yellow. He was running through the drills.
At least he
wasn't standing on the sideline. But Elijah was complete no go.
All right.
So I think there were a couple others in red, but I couldn't see them. They were kind of far away, which is unfortunate. So nothing else to report on there. Maybe I'll get more news today. But Elijah in red, Jalen Ellis again in yellow. Feels like that guy's been wearing yellow for a couple years now. But on the flip side, Gavin Holmes, full go. He looked quick, explosive, was really happy to see him out there as kind of a guy that's also been banged up for a large part of his career.
I mean, yeah, he has been on the doctor's table more than he's been on the field. Yep. And I'm not cracking on the guy at all. It's just been a tough ride for him and these injuries. And so, hopefully this is, I don't even want to talk about him too much because I don't want to jinx it. I mean, seriously, I don't want to talk about him and get all excited and then, hear a random report a week before the season. So just knock on wood with Mr. Holmes. And I don't know how many people will remember, but before he got hurt, the first time, when he was a true redshirt freshman or whatever it was. Yeah, true freshman.
2017, yeah.
I mean, he had a couple games, a couple catches where you thought, wow, this kid's going to be really, really good. And then it's just been injury after injury after injury.
He scored. I mean, he had a couple touchdowns, I think.
Yeah, he had a couple scores or whatever it was, 5 years ago. But, here he is and hope he's healthy and hope he can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing. But, don't want to get too excited about it and like I said, jinx him.
I think it's big for this team though, because yes, they have Monterey Baldwin, but they need another guy.
He's not big enough to be their dude. Yeah.
Right. So I guess what I mean is they need another Monterey, another slot guy who they can use in dynamic ways, kind of like they did with Drew Estrada last year in the jet sweep game. I actually think if you look at what Gavin Holmes did in 2017, his true freshman year, this type of offense actually fits him really well in what he was good at, his skill set, kind of like Monterey. So if he gives them depth there, I think that would be huge because I think the other guys that they're looking at that position are maybe Seth Jones, maybe Jordan Neighbors when he comes in as well, but they need more depth. And so to have an experienced guy there, I think would be big and take a lot of pressure off Monterey.
Yeah, no doubt. Trying to think if there's anything really else. I mean, they've only had 3 or 4 practices or whatever at this point.
Yeah.
Trying to think, is there anything else? Not really. I mean, we need to learn more about this team, I guess, to have more questions about this team and see more of them to probably have more.
Yeah, those are the main storylines. There was nothing that I saw that gave me any indication on what the secondary is going to look like, to be honest, as far as who are the guys that are going to step up there. I mean, I've heard names, I've heard Reggie Bush has made a really nice impact, the true freshman coming in. That safety position is still so up in the air, the field safety spot, which was JT Wood's spot last year. Is Devin Neal going to ascend to that role? I would assume Christian Morgan is probably going to stay at the boundary. So they need someone to fill in at field, which makes sense they'd be Devin Neal, but I don't know if he's the perfect fit for that position, even though I think he's really good and dynamic. I view him more as a boundary. He reminds me more of a Christian Morgan. And so I'm just very curious to see how they address that, but no answers yet. Hopefully we'll get more answers on that and the cornerback spot today. I'll be up at practice, so we'll have some insider notes and things like that.
All right, good stuff there. Meanwhile, tomorrow will be Pro Day, so we'll see for the last time at Baylor's Indoor all these future NFL guys and NFL hopeful guys. So Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard and Tyquan Thornton and Xavier Newman Johnson and, all the guys that were part of All-Star games, Treston Ebner, and even guys that were not part of All-Star games, they will get their crack in front of NFL scouts tomorrow. I would think with Baylor's number of players and the versatility that the group has and the attention that a Jalen Petrie has received. Saw where he was meeting with the Ravens, was one of those teams that he was talking to here recently. With all that going on, I would expect a pretty good turnout, one of the better turnouts they've had in probably several years, I would think, or at least a few years. Maybe I think the last time there was any kind of buzz was James Lynch a couple of years ago. Obviously nothing last year with William Bradley King. He brought some coaches to town, but there wasn't a lot of buzz for that pro day.
Jake Burton, yeah.
There was nothing really for last year. And they were coming off a bad year. There was just nothing. Yeah. So this should be a lot more fun and a lot more exciting. We were talking about it before the show. I don't really know how to preview a 40-yard dash, or we don't even know what guys are doing either. In terms of if they didn't run the 40 at the combine, like a Terrell Bernard, then good chance they'll probably run tomorrow. So if they didn't run 40s, they probably will tomorrow. If they didn't high jump, they probably will tomorrow. If they didn't do anything at the combine because they didn't get invited like Xavier Newman Johnson, they'll do everything tomorrow. And that will be the case for, all the guys who didn't even get to go to All-Star games too. Like I guess you could have maybe like who would even be in that mix?
Tejada.
Yeah, Raleigh Tejada.
He's the obvious one.
Who's the freaking Oklahoma State hero? Jared McVay. There we go. Like I couldn't think of his name. His size is not going to do him any favors, but just in terms of having a crack in front of scouts, Jared McVay could very well be out there. Tejada for sure. And, we'll see. Maybe some former guys will be back to work out as well, or some UMHB guys, because that, is at least that was kind of the case with Browse and Rules. UMHB players would come over here for pro days. So that's kind of a loose generalization of the day, but, it's a pro day, so there's not a real science behind it.
We're going to get to see some speed. When we're talking about Raleigh Tejada and Jared McVay, those are guys that I would expect to run sub 4.5. I would expect to see some real speed there out of those guys in the 40. I think the biggest thing that I'll say going into this is that, Tyquan, Kalen Barnes, JT Woods, those guys are pretty much set with where they're going to go in the draft after their combine. It's hard to get much better than what they did. I don't even know if they'll run the 40 because their 40 times were so good. Like, all you're doing really is like hurting yourself. I would think that, unless Tyquan goes out and runs like a 4.19, I guess that makes it even crazier, but fast is fast. Like if you're in the 4.3s, you're fast. If you're in the 4.2s, you're insanely fast. Anything lower than that is just kind of like you're almost too fast. It's weird, but a lot of guys who have ran that fast really haven't panned out in the NFL. So I'm curious about that. I think Jalen Petrie and Terrell Bernard specifically are the two guys that I think have the biggest chance to rise from this pro day, though. If they run well, they test well, they go through the drills well, I think there's a chance they could elevate themselves around. I know we've talked about Jalen Petrie, but he's gotten first round buzz, which I don't think that's going to happen. I still think he's going to be a second round pick. But if he were to prove me wrong and go out and run like a 4.4, he's a first round pick. I just don't think he will. I don't think he's that kind of athlete speed wise. And then Terrell Bernard, if he surprised me too and runs sub 4.6, that would be incredible for him as well, which again, I don't expect him to run sub 4.6, but if he does, he'd be a huge riser as well. The other guys, like I said, I think they're pretty much set in what they're doing outside of talking to coaches, doing some position drills and things like that.
Yeah, it'll be big for Xavier Newman Johnson just to have that opportunity after last, appearing in the East-West game and then getting the combine snub. And I would hope Terrell runs well. I mean, that's what his training's been based on. From the injury before the Senior Bowl, that was training for the 40-yard dash, if you'll remember that, and then didn't run it at the combine. And so that's obviously been a big point of emphasis for he and his team, so he'll have that opportunity tomorrow to put up a good number, and we'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great group of guys, JT Woods, Jalen Petrie, Terrell Bernard, Tyquan Thornton, Xavier Newman Johnson, so on and so on, and some guys that we're probably not even expecting as well, who are either former guys or UMHB guys or just guys that, I just want to go out there and give it a – you'd be surprised at who we've seen work out at pro days. Like, dudes who have absolutely zero chance of ever playing professional football, but they'll go out there on pro day because they have the opportunity. Yeah. It's like, why not, right?
For sure.
I worked out in front of the Ravens scouts. Like, you did? Yeah, technically. But, yeah, no, it'll be fun. Any other thoughts on it? I mean, just anything you're looking for in particular?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I'm excited to see kind of who's there, though. Teams, what teams are there, what scouts are there, the drills that they're pushed through, who's watching those drills, who's watching who. Those kind of storylines are fun to follow. But outside of that, I mean, these guys put on such a show at the NFL Combine that I kind of anticipate some of that luster will kind of take away from the pro day a little bit. Now, if Tyquan, Kalen, and JT run, I mean, shoot, this might be one of the fastest pro days Baylor has ever had. Probably will be the fastest.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see the point for them. I mean, what's Kalen going to accomplish? What's JT going to accomplish? Yeah. I mean, for those guys who ran sub 4.4s, or right there in that area, Tyquan as well. They don't need to run it again. No. That's it's going to be more for Terrell Bernard and those guys.
And for a guy like Kalen Barnes, he needs to show things in the drills.
Yeah, it's not the speed.
To save his speed for the drills, because he needs to go out there and show he can flip his hips and cover and really do the things that the NFL scouts want to see, because, he just did not get good reviews during the evaluation period. It just seemed like people weren't sold on him even with the speed. So his drill portion is probably going to be the most important of the bunch, to be honest.
He's faster than most humans that you will meet, but that's not enough to make up for all the other aspects of playing football. And so, yeah, when we were talking to one of the all-star guys, like, love his speed, but the problem is like, when have you ever heard somebody bring up Kalen Barnes and say something about him other than his speed?
Yeah, it's not great.
It's everybody. Hey, we all talk about how fast he is, but there's other intangibles, and so that's what's the question mark, I think, for NFL teams is, where is he in all these? He's fast, but what about all the other stuff that you got to do, and how does that play out? And so, hopefully he's received good marks throughout the process, but another opportunity for him tomorrow.
Yeah, and I mean, just because you run a 4.2 doesn't mean that you can't get beat deep, as we saw in the Ole Miss, in the Sugar Bowl. The only touchdown they had was on Kalen Barnes on a deep ball, go route. Like, there are other nuances to the game, and he's got to prove that he can do those. And I'm very interested in it, though. I think he'll prove some things, and we talked about it. I think after his combine, I do think he'll get drafted. I think someone will take a shot on him if he performs well at the pro day.
All right, so elsewhere, let's talk about, before we move to a little spring sports summary, Josh White, LSU linebacker, entered the transfer portal yesterday. Shouted out Dave Aranda as he announced he had received an offer from Baylor. And I didn't put, two and two together. Smokey just mentioned, like, hey, this kid Josh White from LSU apparently entered the transfer portal, and then start to think about it, and then like, oh, Aranda, oh, okay. And then, oh, yeah, 4-star recruit, big-time, player. And here he is now available and on the market. I would think that Baylor fans have a reason to start paying attention, just based off the offer yesterday and the Aranda connection going back to when he was being recruited and then signed with LSU. But your thoughts and kind of the background on Josh White and why Baylor fans may need to pay attention to him.
Right, so there's two sides to this story. So I think the first place to start is actually going back to 2018 when I was covering, Baylor recruiting, and Baylor was the first school to offer Josh White. And they got off to a great start. It seemed like they would be a perfect fit for each other. Josh loved Baylor, loved the coaching staff, loved what they brought to the table as just a defensive staff. I mean, it really felt like it was going to be a great fit for him. And then Dave Aranda, Dennis Johnson swoop in, and those were his two main recruiters from LSU. I think he had a pull to LSU regardless. It was kind of LSU was just, guys from that Houston area love LSU. And I think LSU was kind of one of those dream offers for him. And Dave Aranda, Dennis Johnson did a great job recruiting him. They got him to LSU in the 2020 class. And I mean, if you look at what he did in high school, 6'1", 220 pounds. He was the Houston Touchdown Club Defensive Player of the Year as a senior, defensive MVP in his district as a junior, 347 tackles, 47.5 for loss, 7.5 sacks, 7 forced fumbles during his 3 years on varsity in high school. So a very good player, good athlete as well. In 2018, which would have been prior to his junior year, he ran a sub-4.7 40 time at the opening, so a laser time, 32.7-inch vertical, 4.58 shuttle. Again, this is prior to junior year, so I would assume those times have only gotten significantly better. He would bring a lot of speed to the table for this Baylor defense if they were able to land him. They have the connections. I know he and Drake Dabney have a good relationship. That's actually the picture that he posted on the offer was a picture of Drake Dabney. So they're kind of close. So all signs, truthfully, all signs point to Baylor definitely being in this race. It points to him being a great fit at Baylor. I do not think he would start for Baylor immediately. When you look at kind of their roster, Dylan Doyle seems locked into the mic. The will is up for grabs, so maybe he slides in there, but I do view him more as Dylan Doyle's replacement in the future if they're able to land him. So great connections, like I said. He'd be a great fit for Baylor. He was a top 150 recruit in the entire country in his class. Like I said, he's got 4 years of eligibility. It kind of all really would work out very nicely for Baylor, I think.
Yeah, you never know. There's no such thing as a layup, really. For sure. Especially in NIL era where, somebody gets interested enough and they we'll sponsor you for Hearts for Our Football Happiness Club, and here's $1 billion to come play O-line for, you know what I mean? Like, that's something that could always be a curveball, but no, there seems to be good, strong ties with White and, this staff. So that should be very interesting to follow, and they're going to need linebacker help. Look, they're already losing a good chunk of what we've gotten used to over the past few years. But then when Doyle leaves next year, that's going to be a pretty big vacuum because that's been their linebacking core now for like 4 years. So, yeah, it's about time, and especially when we're not hearing a ton on these younger guys either. Like, we're not hearing a whole lot about Brooks Miller and Anthony Nyanwu and, Tyrone Brown. And, like, we're kind of hearing the same names we've been hearing for, like, 2 years. And there's another wave that kind of needs to start rushing up. And
Will Williams.
Yeah, like all those guys. Really anybody who's not a starter at linebacker, quite frankly, has kind of just been sort of sitting there for a couple of years. And so, maybe this is the route to kind of shake that up a little bit.
Yeah, and TCU and Miami offered just kind of right after Baylor did. So he's going to get a lot of attention. There's no doubt about it. He's a really good player, really good prospect. Hasn't done much at LSU, sustained an injury, so he didn't play a whole lot last year. But again, I think I just want to point this out because I get a lot of questions about the transfer portal. When's Baylor going to offer guys? When's Baylor going to, dive into the transfer portal and start really offering a ton of guys? And it's like, well, this is the exact situation. Why? Josh White enters the portal and they immediately offer him. They're going to wait for the right guys to enter the portal. They're going to wait for the right guys that fit what they're trying to build to enter. So it's not so much they're staring at the portal going through, oh, this guy could be good, this guy could be good. No, they're kind of waiting for the right guys to enter before they do go out and offer them. So, yeah, I think this shows Baylor has room. Baylor's comfortable with where they're at right now, but they're going to continue to probe the transfer portal and wait for the right guys, the right fits to make that entrance.
All right, one more note, and then I want to run through spring quickly and then get y'all's questions. But Austin Novosad, Baylor quarterback commit, Elite 11 selection. The process is confusing to me because – like there's camps and then there's the selections but then there's like more than 11. Like it's just I wish it was kind of clear, like the way they paint it, like how it goes, what its structure is, because it's sort of confusing after a while of like, so was he named Elite 11 or has he been invited to Elite 11 or whatever? But Austin Novosad's Elite 11. how many guys are there now? Like 14 or 15, or like how many there will be? So can you kind of break this down? And it's obviously a nice honor, but it's not as cut and dry as it used to be, where you were at Elite 11, you're just like, bam, star quarterback. Now I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, so this is kind of how the process goes. They go around and do regional camps, and that's what this was for Austin. It was the Elite 11 regional camp. You go to the camp, and then if you get an offer, you get an invite, you get invited to the Elite 11 finals, which is one camp for the top 22 quarterbacks in the entire country. Okay, according to the guys that go to these camps, according to the guys that cover these camps, they invite who they feel like are the top 22 quarterbacks that they were able to see at the regional camps. Then they all get together for a camp at the end of June, typically is when it happens. And then the top 11 from that camp are your Elite 11 for the season. Baylor's only had one quarterback recently that has actually made it inside the final 11. And that was Kyron Drones. Actually, he's the last one. I think Zach Pyron made it, but obviously he's not a Baylor quarterback. So that's kind of how this whole process works. He won the accuracy drill, which was big for him. He won the pro day simulation as well. So he was the best quarterback there. And that was a camp that had Jake Strong, who's the Texas Tech commit, and of course Jackson Arnold, who I believe is an Oklahoma commit, if I'm correct on that. I believe he is. It was a talented camp. Novosad went out there, got himself an invite, and now he'll just wait till the main camp in California at the end of June. And it's exciting for any quarterback, though. People pay attention to the Elite 11. I think he's going to get a rankings boost finally, which is something he's absolutely deserved for a long time. But now people are finally being able to see him in person and get their eyes on him and see just how good he really is and how good he can be. And so this is a huge honor, and just I'm happy for him. This is a great moment for Austin, and I know it's something he's been working hard for.
Yeah, good for him. I mean, we've seen, like you said, Baylor quarterbacks sort of involved, but I don't know, it just feels years past, like, oh, this guy's going to Elite 11, and then you don't hear anything about it because he doesn't make the 11 cut, but he's in the 22, and so it gets a little bit confusing for me.
Yeah, I think, Jacob Zeno got the invite.
But he wasn't really Elite 11 because he didn't finish. Right. But but he got invited to, just.
Drones was the last one, and Drones was like, and Pyron did it as well. They both were terrific, and they finally, that was where headlines finally got made. I think Novosad's going to make that 11, though. I think he's definitely good enough to do it, and I anticipate he will, but it's going to be hard for him to win because the national media will give it to, someone who's a little more...
Arch Manning or something.
Yeah, that's exactly what they'll do. It's sad to see that because I actually thought that Kyron Drones should have won it his year, but hey, it is what it is. He made it. Now just go out, make the final 11, and do something that I know he's been trying to do throughout his career. That's a big moment, honestly, for any quarterback at the high school level.
Yeah, well, good for Austin Novosad, and Baylor quarterback commit doing some good things, and let's see where it goes from here. But getting an Elite 11 invite is a good deal and good exposure for him and ultimately for the program as well. All right, let's get a little spring summary. I don't know if we're going to do this every week. It'll just kind of depend on the news cycle, but we'll do it this week. Baylor baseball, let's start there. Series with Oklahoma this past weekend. And, after, quite frankly, just mishandling the TCU series, they should have won a week ago. They get back to action, Baylor baseball, and they've actually been, playing relatively well. They're just hovering above 500 at this point, but let that TCU series get away from them. Turned around last week, got a win over UTSA, which was a nice, close, tight win. And then turn around, lose 5-3 on Friday night to Oklahoma, lose 9-5 on Saturday to Oklahoma. And that was a game where they gave up a grand slam with a 5-1 lead in the 8th inning and then gave up a grand slam in the 9th inning to lose. So went from 5-1 in the 8th to losing 9-5 thanks to 2 grand slams in back-to-back innings. But then, hey, they turned around on Sunday and won 16-8 to close out the series. And that's great, and it's great the bats got loose, but that's the second Big 12 series now. It's the second one where they've dropped 2 games and shouldn't have and, saved themselves with a win in the very last one, but you still lost the series. And it's a series, not only should you have gotten at least a win, but you should have won both of these series. Like, when you look at it, they should have beaten TCU in 2 out of 3, and they had no excuse to give up 2 grand slams. I mean, come on, in the Saturday contest. So, that's just frustrating that you could have 2 series wins in Big 12 play right now, and instead you have 2 series losses.
Yeah, exactly. And you could even go all the way back to that Sam Houston State game where they were up, 10 to 8 going into the 9th, the bottom of the 9th, and they lose 11-10. Like, how? Oh my! And Steven, oh my goodness! Like, Sam Houston State had 5 errors in that game as well. I mean, just you had opportunities to really just capitalize, get a big win. They don't. They turn right around. That Saturday performance against TCU, they get outscored 3-1 in the 9th as well. Give up that game. And then, of course, like you mentioned, the Grand Slams in the Oklahoma game. You flip those 3 games. You therefore have 2 series wins in the Big 12 to start Big 12 play, and you have a win over Sam Houston State.
And you're like 4 games above 500 rather than being 12-11.
That's baseball is not a generous sport. You know, it's just not. If you make mistakes, you're going to pay for it. And Baylor baseball has absolutely paid for it. And now that makes this stretch that they have coming up absolutely vital. They have, I believe I counted 14 games before they start their series against Texas. And they really need to find a way to win 10 of them. They need to, because this stretch is, I mean, but in all honesty, I mean, look at this stretch. UT Arlington, a series against East Tennessee State, who, you know, is okay, I would say. You know, 17-5, they're pretty good, but I think their RPI is a little bit low. They're still mid-major. You got to find a way to win that series, right? And then you get West Virginia, who, again, mediocre. You have to play Dallas Baptist, which is a tough one, and Texas State as those midweek games, but you got to find a way to win some of those. And then you get Kansas and Lamar. I mean, I really feel like they need to get on a roll at this point in the season, or else they're going to have trouble making the postseason. And so while 10-4 is probably a little lofty, I think it's something they need to figure out a way to do. It's just getting on a roll and playing consistent baseball and having your relievers come in and actually close out games instead of giving up games. Yeah. They need to find a way to show that they can do that, or else this season could get out of hand really quickly, to be honest.
Yeah, it could. I mean, it's frustrating because, you know, I'm not somebody who's dialed in on every pitch by any means, but I know when you give away a game, and they gave up a game this weekend for sure, and then gave up, you know, one for sure against TCU. So, yeah, could be looking at series wins over TCU and Oklahoma, and instead you're like, how do we keep our heads above water? You know, and you can only drop 2 or 3 every weekend and then win that midweek tilt and then take 1 of 3 just to, you know, stay at 500 basically. I mean, that's kind of what they've done the last couple weeks is, you know, 1 of 3 in the series, win the midweek tilt, go 2-2. You're 12-11. Now you're 14-13. And then you're, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the path that it's on. And there's a ways to go still, but yeah, they've got to especially, I mean, get that relief pitching shored up somehow because that's been quite costly.
Right.
And errors and, you know, all sorts of other stuff.
And the problem really is, the reason why I say it's so important for them to really get on a roll right now is because 3 of their final 4 series are against teams that are currently inside the top 10. They have Texas, Texas Tech, then K-State, which is a series they should win. K-State's not good at all. And then Oklahoma State. I mean, it's going to be tough to find wins in there. I mean, you're going to have to really play well. Now it gives you an opportunity to boost your resume. That's only if you have a resume that's even worth considering by the time you get there. So good news for them. Their RPI is still at 50, which is a nice place to be despite all the losses that they have accumulated. They're 1-6 against the top 25. They're 3-8 against the top 50. I mean, they just have not been good against good teams. 6-1 against 100 plus teams ranked outside the top 100. So they feasted on bad teams, have not been good against good teams. And that is a recipe for disaster down the stretch as they face more of the really good teams in the Big 12.
Yep, it's a tough slate coming up. So we'll see what Steve Rodriguez and baseball can do. But yeah, I mean, great to see them break out the bats on Sunday. That's all well and good. Congrats. But, man, win that Saturday game and really celebrate on Sunday with that big win and celebrate a series win. But, yeah, like we've been saying, it's just been kind of hit or miss as far as that goes. But, you know, I guess the good news is you're not getting swept in all these series. Like, that would really be brutal if you were losing every game. But, Yeah, I mean, they're just kind of, just staying head above water, but we'll see how the rest of it plays out. Softball, meanwhile, swept by Oklahoma over the weekend. Glenmore and company just fall into the Sooners like everybody else basically does these days. They have turned into a real softball juggernaut. So now softball 17-13 on the year, and the 3 losses to Oklahoma over the weekend. I saw Glenmore was touting, the fight that his team showed going up against a team like OU, and they obviously had one they let get away as well. That was, self-inflicted. So softball will now turn their attention to Incarnate Word and then Oklahoma State. Incarnate Word, actually, that game tonight at Getterman, and then there'll be Oklahoma State in Waco starting this Friday, April Fools. But softball currently 17-13 on the year, 0-3. The first series this last weekend against Oklahoma.
Yeah, tough to watch them give up the one game they had a chance to win. But, they got to turn things around. The good news is they don't have to play Oklahoma again. And Oklahoma's really, really good, and they're probably going to sweep most of the teams in the Big 12, to be honest, this year. So Baylor's going to have to turn their focus to the other teams in the Big 12 and try to beat up on those teams and collect some wins. That's all you can do at this point. They're 4 games above 500, so they still have a chance to make some noise, but they got to start stringing together wins, much like the baseball team does. I mean, when you're right near 500, you just got to find ways to pile up some wins and get on a roll and really start playing your best at the end of the year. And I'm hoping softball can do that. I'm hoping they turn a corner a little bit, seeing that they feel like they can play with a team like Oklahoma.
Yeah, we will see how it goes, but Oklahoma State up next for them. Meanwhile, what else going on kind of spring-wise that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, tennis knocked off the number 1 team in the nation in TCU. I mean, that was a big win for them. They've kind of had I think everyone overreacts. They lost to Michigan 0-4, and I think it felt like, they're not going to be good this year. Well, they're still 18-2. They're still really, really good. Top 10 team in the country. I think they're going to continue to move up. And they're going to get tested again as they got Texas and TCU coming up this weekend. So it's going to be a lot of fun trying to see, kind of how they stack up against the better teams in the Big 12 and see if they truly are, a contender for a national championship. Because if they go out and win these 2, I think you got to feel pretty good about this being, a top 3 team in the country, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so, and that was big to get that win this past week. Beat TCU is fun in anything, but especially when they're number 1. I know women's tennis fell this past weekend to Oklahoma State. Yeah. But they're top 25-ish. But yeah, the men are really right there in a strong position. And was I seeing some Baylor track and field love?
Yeah, they're actually number 2 in the country right now. The men.
How? Yeah, I saw that and I was like,
I thought the same thing.
How is that even possible?
Yeah, they've just gotten on a roll. They competed really well at the Texas Relays this past weekend, which I think helped propel them.
Yeah, but I need to figure out how track grading works because I looked at that and I've kept up with that, and they had 2 medalists, and so when I turn around and I see they're the number 2 ranked team in the country, I'm like, what?
Yeah. They're at 225 points. And then you got Texas at 420 points at number 1. But I actually texted Colt that same thing. 4 of the top 5 track teams in the country are in the state of Texas right now, with A&M and Tech being 4 and 5. USC is the only outlier. So, again, I don't know if they've just been in more events or what's going on, but right now the facts are they're number 2 in the entire country.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get an email or something, message about, well, this is how they do it in track and field, and it's they just turns out they're number 2 because they've been in the most events participated or something. But yeah, that was just all due respect. I haven't seen a bunch of results that make me go wow, this is a number 2 team in the country. You know what I mean? It's cool, but I was just very caught off guard by that. So I know they had a pretty successful Texas Relays and, getting some good performances across the board. But, yeah, that was surprising. So see where that is at the end of the year. But, had the changeover to Coach Ford and seems to be doing well. I mean, we're talking about him and they're number 2. So we'll see how that keeps going. And I do believe they have an event coming up this weekend here in Waco, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, the Baylor Invitational, I believe, is this weekend. So that will be fun to check that out. And we'll see them keep, hopefully doing their thing and just stacking points and doing all that. But that'll be out starting on Friday through Saturday, the Baylor Invitational out at the Clyde Hart facility. So you have that to look forward to as well. Anything else from spring sports or anything of the like?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that was pretty much it. I mean, again,
only an hour of notes.
Yeah, only an hour of notes. And we got a decent sized mailbag as well. So lots of questions, but hey, it's fun. Lots of interest in Baylor sports right now.
All right, let's dive in. Scotty B, out of all the guys in the pro day for Baylor football, which players make a big jump in NFL draft stock?
Yeah, I think it's so if I got to pick one, I think it's Terrell Bernard, because I think Petrie is pretty much a first or a second round pick. Now, maybe he makes the jump in the first round if he, just shows just amazing qualities, which he might. I mean, he's got amazing qualities, but the athleticism part is what I'm intrigued by. But I think Terrell Bernard needs to show a lot. Since he didn't run the 40, I think he's got to show that he can run, show the speed, and then also I think he'll show very well in the drills. I think we pretty much can guarantee that about Terrell Bernard. He's going to be very good at all the drills they put him through.
Yeah, I don't know how much more Jalen can rise, really. I think he could cement himself maybe as a first rounder for some teams, but I mean, he's going to be a second rounder, at best, probably lower first round guy, but we can kind of ballpark him. I have no idea where a Terrell Bernard goes, because you can just go 5th through 7th rounds. I mean, that's you got to be really general with it, because we really don't know. So yeah, Terrell Bernard's a good candidate for that if he can run a good 40. And Xavier Newman Johnson could really help himself since he had no combine, just in terms of trying to find a spot on a roster. But everybody, Kalen Barnes could really help himself by doing more than just running fast. Tyquan's done pretty well for himself. I don't know how much better he can really do other than what he's done so far. And so, yeah, there's plenty of guys. There are definitely more guys who could help themselves than there are who don't need any help, that's for sure. Which quarterback competition in the Big 12 other than Baylor's competition is interesting right now? I'd say West Virginia's because of the youth in that room.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So Green versus Crowder is, I think, the competition at West Virginia. I think Crowder is actually going to be a pretty good quarterback. So I think he might end up winning the job. It just might take a minute because Green is more established and the better runner. But I'm really curious, honestly. There's a lot of good competitions in the Big 12. That Max Duggan versus Chandler Morris one, I think, is going to be really intriguing. I expect Chandler Morris to win that job. I think he's a better fit for Sonny Dykes' offense. But Duggan's been the starter there for a long time, what feels like a long time at least. And then I think Tyler Shugg versus Donovan Smith at Texas Tech will be an interesting one as well. Kind of see who rises to the top there. But I think I'd go with Morris versus Duggan just because it's kind of the unproven but showed glimpses commodity with the guy that's just been the starter there forever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because we know Ewers is going to be the starter, pretty much, right? Is he really going to be pushed? By
he
Hudson
better
Card?
be with all this talk about him. I'm not going to sit here and then when the season rolls around, if he's not throwing 5 touchdowns a game, I'm not going to hear any patience talk with all this BS we've been hearing about him for the last 2 years. I'm going to say that right now. Kid better go out there and ball, or I have no threat or anything, but. When he's shoved down your throat when you follow recruiting, you don't like it, don't watch it. Well, I can't just turn off all of recruiting and avoid him. So, we've heard so much, it better be him. Better be him.
You would think. You would think, right?
You would think, yeah. And who's going to beat him for that job?
It'd be Hudson Card, which I just don't see.
That's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't either.
All right, so Oklahoma, I guess.
Dylan Gabriel, right?
It's got to be Dylan Gabriel. Iowa State.
Hunter Deckers, I think, will have that job. He looked okay in service time.
Apparently he's better than Purdy from what we were hearing last year.
We'll see.
Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah, he's like an all-time quarterback. He just didn't. I know he didn't rise to the level they wanted to, but like they haven't had like all these amazing quarterbacks outside of like Seneca Wallace, you know,
which is literally the only guy that anybody can name who played football for Iowa State in the last 20 years. That's not like 5 years out of college.
Yeah, no, for sure.
The only name one other guy you've ever heard anybody bring up with Iowa State and the good old days of their success that's not named Seneca Wallace.
Yeah, what Joel Lanning?
That's the first I've ever even heard that. Yeah, you're the first to actually pop a name other than Seneca Wallace. Yeah, they've been riding Seneca Wallace for a while. But I mean, point being, there's some of these that are already decided. So I'd say TCU's an interesting one, Tech's an interesting one. Those would be a couple. Anyways, Baylor Nation come out Sunday, 1 p.m. Baylor men's tennis taking on top 5 TCU in Waco, where gold shirts will be given out. So there's Scotty B. He'll be at the tennis game, and hopes you will be as well. Big Grizz, any transfer portal news? Well, we just talked about Josh White.
Yeah, that's the main one right now. I think, again, Baylor's been pretty obvious with what they've done in the transfer portal. When the right guy enters, they offer him. But outside of that, there hasn't been a whole lot of wait a long time and then offer a guy. So this is kind of where we're at right now. As far as the basketball side, if you're asking on that side, they got to wait for their roster to get cleared up before they can really figure out how many transfers, what position they want to take a transfer at. Still a lot of variables on both sides. And honestly, the Baylor football roster has a lot of movement as well that I think will happen before summer. So there'll be a lot more answers to kind of what the roster looks like and how many guys they can actually take.
Yeah, and I haven't been looking, but I will now start paying a bit closer attention to the transfer portal. Man, some of these sites are getting really junky. The transfer portal, and I didn't see like the Baylor players entering it, but maybe they have. I don't know. But the guys who weren't on the roster last week that are not listed any longer, I wonder, what their plans are. Maybe some of them are done with football or whatever. But yeah, on the transfer portal for both football and basketball, it's kind of a wait and see right now, and gonna need a little patience. Halfanito, do you think Baylor needs updated, improved baseball facilities to be consistently competitive in the Big 12?
Yes, I do. I think they do need to upgrade the facilities, not the stadium, but they need more as far as weight room. I know they got the pitching lab, but they need an indoor facility. They need some things for sure.
They need a jolt. I think, I like Steve Rodriguez a lot, but it's kind of hard to look around this weekend. You see all that excitement with Texas Tech and Texas, and you see, kind of the big stakes baseball being played. TCU in years past, and
they're still good.
And they're still good.
Their coach,
right?
They just lost a superstar.
But like Texas Tech, and TCU in particular, those three really have a good thing going in baseball. And you just wish Baylor. It's kind of. It's not maybe something you think about all the time, but then you turn on one of these games randomly and you see the crowd and you see how exciting it is, and you're kind of like, dang, I wish. Maybe it was a little bit more like that here. But, certainly making improvements and making it easier to lure prospects would be beneficial. But, it's also not a full ride sport. And that makes it a little bit different in how you can manage everything and what you can do versus what other teams are allowed to do and are capable of doing. So, yeah, that would help. Just a general jolt would be good, though. I think coming off 2 weekends where you should have come out with series wins. Alpha Needle, rank in order of best to worst from Baylor's football recruiting classes from 2017 to 2022.
Yeah, that's just a tough question because we've seen production out of some classes, and then the rest is just projection. So for me, if I'm looking at it and I go, okay, talent-wise, how am I ranking these classes? I actually think 2022 is the best class that Baylor's had during this run. That's this last class that's enrolling right now. I really like that class. I think it's very deep, lots of potential, good pickups on the offensive line, elite wide receivers. I really like the 2022 class. Then I'd go 2021, then 2017, where we saw the production, not necessarily all this high-end talent, but a ton of production. 2018, 2019, 2020. That 2019 class, just when you go look at it, they're just missing a huge chunk of that class, just not on the roster anymore.
Was that Rule's first one?
No, 2017 was Rule's first one. They lost a lot of guys, but also a lot of those guys made big impacts at Baylor as well. So it's hard to rank them too low. But yeah, I mean, it's so hard. It's very nitpicky because some of these classes, they only have like 10 guys left on the roster, and some of them didn't make big impacts, but that's probably the order I'd go with it.
All right. Let's see here. Stat Boy, what is more likely to happen this coming football season? Kansas wins 2 or more Big 12 games, or Baylor repeats as Big 12 champions? I say Kansas. I would take that Kansas bet. I mean, if you're only asking for one more than they got last year, I think Lance Leipold can get them one more. Now, I'm not exactly sure where that comes from, but yeah, two Big 12 wins versus repeating as Big 12 champions. I mean, that's a tall task, dude, to repeat as Big 12 champs. So I'm gonna give Kansas the nod here because I think it's a lot easier to win one more game than you did the last time.
Yeah, asking Kansas to win 2 Big 12 games is a really tough ask as well.
Winning a Big 12 championship is really hard too.
I know, but I think if we look through the past, like
2 games.
I know, but I think if you go look from 2013 to now, I think Baylor probably has their 3 Big 12 championships. Are probably like they have 3 years with the Big 12 championship. That's probably more than Kansas has 2 or more Big 12 wins.
Yeah, but Lance Leipold hadn't been the coach that entire time.
But is he good? I mean, they were mediocre. They weren't good last year. I mean,
you could put Saban in charge of that program, dog. They were going to be bad last year. So, I mean, outside, and I'm not talking Saban where he can go to Lawrence and go, oh, my Alabama transfer portal's right here, and I'm just going to bring all those guys, because that's all that would happen in order for it to change quickly. I'm just saying, rough. Okay, I don't care enough about this to argue about it all that much because it's not that big a deal.
They're both very difficult to picture, honestly, both. I'm probably going to go with Baylor winning the Big 12 championship just because I feel comfortable thinking that they're going to be a top 2 team in the Big 12. More comfortable in that than saying that Kansas is going to go and win 2 games in the Big. I mean, that's a tough ask for that program. Now, I know it's year 2 under Leipold, and it's just 2 wins. I'm going to call it a toss-up. If you said 3 Kansas wins, I would for sure go with Baylor. So how about I put it?
Yeah,
more
that's
like
what I'm
that?
saying. They're
kind of right on level. Yeah, for me
it's
though.
2 games. Yeah. That's my point. It's 2 freaking wins. You got 1 last year. You can't get 1 win versus Baylor having to go 7-2 versus the all improved field with better quarterbacks this year. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Get 1 more win. I mean, come on. All right. Let's see. Ashley Hodge. If Kansas wins the NCAA tournament and then gets hammered by the NCAA shortly after for 5 level 1 violations plus a history of pervasive and egregious cheating, will the Jayhawks have to vacate this national title? Will Bruce Weber finally be able to get a haircut when that happens? Yeah,
I don't think they're going to vacate a national championship. No. I don't think it's going to happen, even though, maybe it should if they really do get these level of violations. But I don't know. I don't see it happening.
I'm not holding my breath, Ashley. Yeah. If there was anybody else, this is Kansas State, there'd be a better chance of them, getting hammered that way. If this was Kansas Wesleyan, then they'd for sure get hammered, but it's the Kansas Jayhawks. So quite a departure from our last question in terms of talking about this school. But no, nothing will happen. And if I'm wrong, then I'd never be happier than to be wrong about this and actually see them get what's coming. But I don't believe it for 1 second that they'll bring down Kansas, no matter how long or egregious the cheating has been or the rule breaking has been.
They didn't do it to North Carolina, so why would they do it to Kansas?
But Oklahoma State, no tournament for you. Yeah, no, that's I mean, it's a great thought, but not holding my breath. And Bruce Weber's going to need some ponytail rubber bands, I guess, to keep growing that hair out. Bear Sack, how will the wide receiver production compare to last year's production with Ty and Drew gone? Who will be the main go-to guys, and can we be as productive or more productive than 2021?
Well, and also you got to throw R.J. Sneed in there, who had 573 yards. He was actually second on the team in receiving.
Very quiet 573.
Very, very quiet. Drew Estrada only had 367. And then Tyquan 948 yards and 10 touchdowns. He was terrific. I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be more productive. And this isn't necessarily me saying that any singular guy is going to be better than Tyquan was this year, but I think their passing game as a whole is just going to be better in year 2 with Jeff Grimes, another year of the offensive line. I think the run game will be good again. I just think they're going to open up the playbook more and be able to do a little bit more things down the field. but I don't know that they'll have a guy that kind of rises to the level of Tyquan. I mean, 948 yards and 10 touchdowns, that's a lot to ask. But I do think that they could probably have 2 or 3 guys that get close to, that go over 500 yards instead of just 2 a year ago.
Yeah, I think they should be better overall. I would hope we see a few more guys involved than last year. But I mean, they had a good crop of guys, but I just think that with it being so wide open, like it could be 10 guys doing the role of like 4 this year.
Yeah, and Ben Sims as well. We know he's going to be involved too. So it's going to be very spread out. Yeah. Do you think there will be one guy that has...
Dabney's the second leading receiver returning.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's a crazy thought.
They're top 2 because my tight end piece, I've been working on it. They're like the review deal. And so I was looking at it and I was like, okay, they return their top 2 tight ends. Oh, wait, these are their top 2 returning wide receivers. And Drake Dabney had
91 yards and a touchdown.
There you go. Yeah. Number 2 receiver on the team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to replace. I mean, because those guys basically played the entire games most times. I mean, outside Monterey coming in for a carry every once in a while, they played a large majority of the snaps. So, do you think there will be a guy that steps up to the level of Tyquan? 948 yards and 10 touchdowns? Do you think they'll have an outlier guy who is really that productive, or do you think it will be more... I think it's going to be more likely that there's 3 guys with over 600 yards receiving than there is one guy with 900 yards and 10 touchdowns.
Yeah, personally. I mean, if Gavin Holmes didn't have a history of injuries, I'd maybe say him, but I can't go all in on that right now and start predicting him to have massive years. We've done this.
And he's just not enough. A downfield, like he's a short slant guy, a handoff guy. Like that's a lot of yak to anticipate from Gavin, which I find hard to say as well. I feel like it'd have to be an outside guy, but it's hard to pinpoint.
I don't see
which
a good candidate.
One.
No.
Yeah. Howell would be my best guess. I think Howell or like a Jalen Ellis if he actually stays healthy.
Yeah, I mean, Ellis. Let's show me something before I want to start talking about, what he can possibly do. Because we did that for him a couple of years ago, and now it's like 2 years later, and we're still saying it's almost like squirrel, like saying the same thing from 2 years ago. And, at some point, like you got to show, like Jared Atkinson, like how many off seasons in a row do we go, well, Jared Atkinson, if he can just, and then like, there was one year where there were circumstances, but then he came back and it was still, if Jared Atkinson can, and so that's kind of what Jalen Ellis you could turn into, or Squirrel Williams or whatever. So, but your point being, they need some guys to step up. I think Hal Presley could do, but I just can't see him making that massive of a jump, going from like 40 yards on 2 catches or whatever his stats are.
1 for 15.
Okay, even worse. 2,000-yard wide receiver. Yeah. Like that's insane. And look, who's throwing the football too? I mean, that also comes into play, because if they don't have like a downfield game that's very accurate, like that's not going to help your receiving yards. So yeah, there's a lot of questions as far as that goes. But right now, that wide receiver room in terms of who emerges and all that is a big question mark. Although there's some guys you like, there's just nothing really proven at all there right now. Which is what springtime's for, in part. So thank you for the questions this week. And Bear Sack there for closing us out, along with Stat and Alpha and Big Grizz and Scotty B as well. And that will bring us to a close. Got another media session later on this evening. Got Pro Day on Wednesday morning. And just a lot more upcoming here over the next few days. Grayson, any words before we leave here?
No, I'm excited for Pro Day. I'll be out here tomorrow. I'm excited to cover that. I think it's going to be a really good event, really fast event, which will be nice to see, and nice to see some scouts at Baylor. And I think there'll be a lot of Baylor players out there that get to kind of see what Pro Day's about, and they actually get to see a cool Pro Day. Some years it's like you said, 1 or 2 guys. So that'll be fun to see. And also, be sure to check out Sic'Em 365 Premium site if you're not a subscriber yet. We have all kinds of recruiting, basketball, football, news, notes, and nuggets. And, of course, Sic'Em 365 Radio every day, or 365 Sports Radio every single day, 3 to 6 as well. Be sure to check that out on our YouTube channel as well.
Yes, please do. Please hit subscribe, and please spread the word as well. And that will do it for us. Thank you to Jack and Armstrong behind the scenes. And we will talk to you this afternoon on Sic'Em 365 Radio every weekday, 3 to 6, and a lot more coming up at the website and the YouTube channel and all that good stuff. So until next time, for Grayson Grudenhafer, I'm Craig Smoke. This has been the Bearcast on Sic'Em365.com.